All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Willamette's Professional Development webinar series with our latest session, How to Optimize Job Searching Using AI. My name is Abby Kahl, and I'm the Director of Alumni and Community Engagement here at Willamette. Tonight's session will focus on how harnessing AI tools can support and refine your job searching experience, from identifying roles to creating an effective resume. I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Ann Lapour and Ruthie Ditzler. Ann began her work at Willamette in 2017, where she has worked in the Career Development Center as an advisor, instructor, and administrator. Ann earned her BA and PhD from the University of Missouri-Columbia, where she focused on career and vocational psychology. Her academic interests focus on personal identity and values that influence the development of career goals and aspirations. Ann is a believer in the nonlinear and always fascinating directions a career can take, and loves working for Willamette, where interdisciplinary opportunities can fuel rewarding careers. Ruthie Ditzler is the Assistant Director of Graduate Advising and an accredited career coach based in Portland. With over a decade of experience in education and professional development, she is passionate about helping people turn "I don't know what I want" into "I've got a plan." She works with a variety of groups, including early professionals navigating the defining decade of their 20s and mid-career professionals seeking new opportunities or upward growth. Ann and Ruthie, thank you so much for joining us. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to both of you.
Thank you, Abby. So as Abby said, I'm Ann Lapour, and I'm the Executive Director of Career Initiatives for Willamette. And thank you for being here this evening and engaging in this program with us. We are, as you know, here to talk a little bit about AI and the job search. And we're going to do that by using a little bit of demonstration, a little bit of an overview. Ruthie's going to show you some amazing resources, and then we'll open it up for some questions at the end. So let's skip on forward. That's us. So you've already heard a little bit about us, but I just want to make a couple more notes, which is that I primarily work on the Salem campus for the most part, but I'm in Portland quite frequently. Ruthie works a lot on the Portland campus, and particularly with our graduate students in the MSDS program, MSCS, and also the MBA for Professionals program. That's not those are not the only populations that Ruthie works with. Ruthie has worked a lot with folks who are in various career transitions and career pivots, and we'll bring that into the context of this conversation today as well. And then just one more, I'll just say one word about the agenda, which is, this is generally speaking what we're going to cover today. We want to talk a little bit about why learn AI? Many of you may have engaged in job searches before without using this technology, and did just fine. So, and I know that I personally was a little bit slow to jump on board, but we know that it's a really useful tool, and I think you'll see during this presentation that Ruthie has some really creative ideas for using AI. I think a lot of people think about it just in terms of, oh, it can write a cover letter or it can write a resume, but that is just barely scratching the surface and not really even necessarily the best use of it. So Ruthie has some creative ideas for using it to help you in some different ways that you may not have thought about before. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the importance of using this in tandem with more traditional job search strategies that you may have heard about in the past and used in the past, and how employers are using it. So I'm going to let Ruthie take over for a bit and get going on this content.
Thanks, Ann. All right, y'all. So everyone's talking about AI these days, which is why we're here to talk about it too. It's one of the things that absolutely can help you streamline a job search process. But I also wanted to share that AI literacy is the #1 in-demand skill in 2025. So this was a study that came out recently. LinkedIn released it in March of this year. It's called Skills on the Rise, and AI literacy was at the top of that list. And then you can also see this annual report that was done by Microsoft and LinkedIn, highlighting some of the important things. Leaders saying that they wouldn't hire someone without AI skills, right? 71% of leaders saying that they would prefer to hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills rather than someone who's more experienced without them. And that the vast majority of leaders state that someone coming in at an entry-level position with AI skills could be given greater responsibilities. So when I'm working with clients and students and thinking about using AI in a job search, it's kind of like a two birds, one stone approach, right? Where this is strategic for your career. Employers are looking for these skills in the workplace, and using AI for your job search helps teach you those valuable skills at the same time as it streamlines your process. Okay. So I'll say that. I also want to throw out a disclaimer, which is that AI is something that I would not recommend using for all aspects of your job search. And I'll go over some of this as we're moving along through this presentation. It's best the best uses of this are to brainstorm. It's a really helpful tool for brainstorming. It's great for providing examples. And generative AI is really great for giving feedback. So those are the three places that I think are really great for relying on AI. And the other thing that I'll say is just kind of there are like ethical implications that come with using AI. So I know for Willamette's career services team, when we're working with students and alums and we're talking about using AI as a tool in their job search, that is, a conversation that I have with someone before we start using this tool. There are privacy implications, thinking about ways that these tools are trained and how they use our data. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. There's bias and discrimination that's present in AI because it's trained on data that could, amplify existing societal biases, which can lead to unfair or discriminatory outcomes, which is relevant to hiring, where AI is increasingly used for decision making. There's environmental implications of energy consumption for data centers. So there's a lot going on here, and I don't want to just jump into let's use these tools without first identifying that that's something to consider. So before we kick things off, I would love, Sarah, if you could launch the poll so that we could take a look. I am curious, when you're thinking about AI, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is I know nothing about AI. I've never used it before. I'm feeling terrified to use these tools in my job search. 5 is I'm super confident. I'm using it all the time. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Would love to get those answers and see where we're at with the audience. Okay. And Sarah, I don't think I can control this on my end, so let me know when you are ready. Okay, cool. She'll close it soon. All right, curious to see what people have said so far. where are we at comfort-wise? All right, looks like a pretty solid mix here. So across the board, we've got some people who are very new to using AI, and then we have some folks who are 4s and 5s who I'm guessing are pretty comfortable. So I will be very curious in the Q&A the Q&A feature as we go along. I would love if folks are have methods where they're using AI in their job search. If you would be willing to share those as I go along, that would be awesome. So thanks for finishing the poll. Okay, so before we move forward, this is something to consider too, right? So we're talking about AI from a job seeker perspective, but AI is being used on both sides of the job search, right? Anne, do you want to speak to this slide?
Sure. I just think it is helpful to know that this is happening on both sides of this process. So I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this idea of applicant tracking systems. This is the thing that people talk about where your resume is searched for things like keywords. And this is technology that's doing this. This is not necessarily a person with a piece of paper in front of them. So that's kind of old news, but this has gotten a lot more sophisticated. SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource, that professional association, has some interesting articles. There's a couple right there. And even if you just Google that organization and the use of AI in the recruiting process, you'll see how that has gotten a little bit more sophisticated. And in some cases, there's even some interesting research about how it actually makes hiring practices less discriminatory, which is sort of interesting. But I think the thing to remember is that this does depend a bit on the industry. So some organizations, some industries are still going to have a person looking at a PDF of a resume with their eyeballs. So you need to be ready for both types of a recruiting process. So it's just helpful to remember that it's good to know sort of what is occurring in the industry that you're applying in.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Anne. So there are so many different ways that we can implement, use AI, use these tools. So I'm going to go over several of them this evening. Things like optimizing your resume and cover letter, which I think a lot of people are most familiar with that aspect of it. Things like practicing interview questions and answers, just generally doing company research and like looking for themes across different roles that you're applying for. And also doing things like crafting professional communication, outreach messages, getting support, with following up with hiring managers and things like that. So these are some of the additional things that I won't necessarily address today. And we're going to dive into a few other things in more detail. I see that Eric is sharing, I've used AI to help me summarize company profiles and especially analyze financial performance. Yeah, it's a great way to synthesize, what's going on, comparing, getting a big list of companies and stuff like that. So before we jump into this, I just wanted to showcase a few different free AI options. So this is something that, AI is rapidly expanding. Companies are coming out with new tools all the time. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT today because that's the tool that I'm most familiar with, but there are plenty of options to explore. There's also a lot of freemium tools. So, tools designed for job seekers where there's a free element to it, but then you can pay for additional services, where they are, creating ways to job search trackers, and then you can tailor your resumes and cover letters to the jobs that you are keeping track of on the tracking side of things. So there's just a ton of stuff out there. There is a slight difference between tools that are out there. ChatGPT and Claude are great for, kind of text-based AI usage. Gemini, which is Google's proprietary tool, is helpful if you're really integrated with kind of like the Google suite. Perplexity is one that's really great for research and kind of like doing deeper research. And then Kick Resume AI is an example of one of those tools that's designed specifically for job seekers. A couple others that come to mind, there's one called Hunter, there's another called Teal, Prentice. So there's a lot of tools out there that are all kind of in that space supporting job seekers. One thing I'll say is that using different types of generative AI, you're going to get slightly different responses. And so one thing that you can do is if you're interested, you can kind of crowdsource across different tools, and, use the same prompt across different tools and then combine what you get to create something that's really personal to you. So seeing a couple things come up in the chat. If you have, similar to what Eric just said, if you have other ways that you have used AI to help your job search so far, I would be super curious to see that now. So please don't hesitate to share and I'll take a look at that too. Okay, so several tips I will go over quickly before we jump into this to help maximize how these tools work for you. So the more specific your prompt, the better the response. So generative AI, these tools are blank slates, and it's kind of like you can think of it as garbage in, garbage out. Okay. So the clearer you are about what you're asking for, the more well-designed your prompt is to kind of give the tool the context and, like the role that you want it to play, exactly what you're asking for, the better your result is going to be. I will say I encourage you to start a new chat for each topic. So we'll take a look at what this means when I get into my ChatGPT as an example. But let's say you're using the AI to help with pieces of your resume, and then also with your LinkedIn About section, and then also to do some research on potential companies that are hiring. Keeping track of those things separately, and so you're not confusing the tool, just start a new fresh chat for each topic. Keeps it nice and streamlined. I also encourage you to break each project into smaller steps. So rather than saying, optimize my entire resume, taking it piece by piece, working on your summary, working on your skills and the keywords, that you're sharing there, going through and working on your professional experience is going to give you like more, the results are going to be like more tailored. And you can, to avoid the very sort of generic chatbot speak that I think a lot of people hesitate to use AI, you can actually share examples of your previous writing that you would like ChatGPT to mimic. So if you have cover letters you've written that you really like the tone, if you have, pieces of, things you've written on your LinkedIn, pieces of writing you've shared in other contexts, you can put that into ChatGPT and say, here's an example of my tone of voice. I would like you to mimic this type of writing moving forward. These tools are conversational. They're designed to iterate as you are going. So if you get a result back that's not working for you, continue the conversation with the tool, right? Something like, hey, I like what you said about my background in this section, but I would like you to include more information about X, Y, and Z here. Like, please generate this result again. Right. So it's going to come back to you and have that conversation. Usually ChatGPT will return, output and will ask you a follow-up question to see if you want to generate different results. I will demonstrate how to add custom instructions to ChatGPT. So that's another way that you can personalize the tone and kind of who you are and what you're using this tool for. And then a couple just words of warning, things to avoid. So as I mentioned before, these tools, when we're thinking about how our data is used, generative AI and language learning models are trained on the data that people are inputting, right? It's getting smarter and smarter as we use these tools. So I always encourage people to make sure that they're not sharing any personally identifiable information or anything confidential when you're inputting information here. So for myself, if I'm doing something with my resume, I'm making sure to leave any contact information out of that conversation. Certainly don't include any financial information or passwords because we cannot be sure how this is being used. I also really, really encourage you to not use AI to create your job search assets from scratch. Okay. If you are, if you just say, create a project management resume, here's a job listing, create a resume for this job listing without giving it any information about you, without giving it any content to modify, it's definitely going to create a resume for a project manager, but that resume is not going to be connected to you in any way, right? So this tool is much better. It's better to use it to refine information that you've already provided about yourself rather than building something completely from scratch. That being said, always double check the information that it produces. Sometimes AI will just glitch and make up something. And so you would never want to just turn in a resume that you have not carefully reviewed to make sure that everything on there is accurate and accurately reflects you. And humans are smarter than AI at this point. So please do proofread your resume, right? Human eyes are going to catch things that AI is not going to catch. So as you are using this tool, please do proofread the content you're creating. Ask other people in your life to take a look at what you're creating so that you can get feedback from a real live person before turning that content in. Okay, so we're going to go through, keeping an eye on time. I'm going to jump through real quick a few different ways that we can use AI. So again, AI is a great tool for brainstorming, and it is an excellent place to jump off when you are not sure where to start. So whether someone is early career, kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, or maybe you're mid-career and you are ready to explore some different options, oftentimes people are facing analysis paralysis, where it's just like, I don't even know where to start. Okay. And this is a great place to use this tool. So I'm actually going to demo on ChatGPT to see what this will generate for us when we're looking at this. So here's a prompt where we are giving it information. You can fill in the blank here, information about your educational background, hard and soft skills, things you care about, what you value, qualities that are important to you in a work environment. Okay. And I went ahead and already filled this in with information about someone who's a project manager with a background in environmental science. So I filled in some things about hard skills, data analysis and agile methodologies, things they care about, work-life balance, good compensation, qualities in their day-to-day work environment. And then let's see what is generated. Okay. So it's going to spit back a bunch of different job titles that, based on what you shared about yourself, might be interesting for you to explore. Okay. So it's showing things related to clean tech in this case, things related to consumer electronics, kind of like the NGO nonprofit route that you could go, thinking about stuff like health tech, getting into corporate social responsibility. So there are so many different angles that this person with project management experience could take based on their interests. Okay. So this is a great tool to just be like, wow, I've never even heard of like an ESG program manager. What is that? Right. And so you can actually start a conversation here with this tool to be like, tell me more about the day-to-day responsibilities of someone who works at, in corporate social responsibility as a project manager. What qualities or like what skills does that type of position require, and you can actually have a bit of a conversation with the tool to go back and forth and learn more. I will say that this is a great jumping off point. This tool is amazing for brainstorming, and I would always not stop here. This is something that I would use to narrow it down to maybe 5 or 10 job titles you're interested in exploring. And then I would take that to a real live conversation with real live humans who do those jobs. Okay. So again, use this to get some ideas and then move it into like real human conversations to learn more. Okay. Another way that we can use AI is when we're doing company research. So someone mentioned that in the chat. Same thing, right? When we are thinking about like who's out there that I should know about, you want to dive into companies that are hiring based on your skill set. And you can actually use AI to create a table, which is really helpful. Where column 1, you say generate a table, where column 1 is the company name, column 2 is the company website, column 3 is information about the company culture. You can just tell it exactly what it is that you want it to spit out. And then again, it requires you to get out there. Now you have a tool, you have a table where it's generated, 20 companies that are hiring based on XYZ skill in your area. And that's going to be a great jumping off point to then do research, figure out who works at that company, and continue the conversation with real live humans there. Okay. Next is one of my favorite use cases for using ChatGPT. So I don't know about you all, but I'm someone who really dreads writing cover letters. I have a hard time talking about myself in a job-seeking context. And I really like using ChatGPT as a way to create kind of a career story, sort of like the why behind why I'm interested in doing whatever it is that I'm applying for. Humans in general are really drawn to narratives. And so this can be some great content for your LinkedIn About section. It can help synthesize sort of themes that you'll use across a cover letter. This helps you prepare for an interview as you think about your background and what inspired you to potentially be making a career transition or get interested in a new career. If you're as a student who's a recent grad. So what I like to do, and I do this with students all the time, is just open a document, start a Google Doc, Word doc, whatever works for you, and just start typing. And you're going to brain dump answers to these questions. Okay. Don't worry too much about spelling, grammar. Just kind of do as you're thinking, just let it flow out. Free flowing, talk in your own voice. How do you say things? And you just want to get all this content down on one page. And you using your voice is going to help create a story that sounds more like what you would actually say. And then we're going to use a prompt, and I'll show you again in ChatGPT about about crafting a compelling career story. Okay. Excuse me. So this is an example. where you are, you would insert your target role, you would insert your areas of expertise, you would insert where you currently work, and then you're going to copy and paste that background brain dump of information that you shared from answering those questions. So I'll share an example. I actually did this with a student recently. So apologies for the scrolling, but I'm just going to share. This is someone who's in the Masters of Data Science program. This person was talking about their background as a first-generation college student, how they have worked in education and they've seen, the impacts that data has on decision-making in education. And then as a data science master student, have done research that revealed gaps in the data in the Salem-Keizer school district. So the student was talking, we're taking down a bunch of different notes. And then I, helped this person update this prompt, where they're interested in, they shared their experience, they shared their academic background, and then kind of what they're aiming for. And when we scroll down, what we see is how ChatGPT synthesizes this and pulls it into something that is really concise, easy to follow, but pulls in examples that are specific to that person. So as we're navigating this, AI heavy world where so many people out there are using these tools to create their resumes and create their cover letters, it's important to be able to show off your personality, to show what differentiates you from other job seekers out there. And this is a really great tactic for doing that. Okay. And if you don't like, that's the thing too, is if there are things that come up where you're reading it and you're like, I don't know, this doesn't really sound right, or that doesn't sound like me. Again, you get in there, hey, I like what you said about this part here, but I want you to highlight more of my background in X, Y, and Z. Here's information from my resume to back that up. Or, this story, I like where you're going with this story, but it feels incomplete. Like, here's a little bit more information I'd like you to integrate. So you just get it going, right? And if you're missing content that you'd like it to include, you can start that conversation. And then once you have your personal brand and your narrative, we're thinking about kind of the resume approach, okay? So when I'm helping someone start to optimize their resume using AI, one of the first things that we're doing is, again, using this tool to brainstorm and synthesize by identifying the most important skills they should highlight for their role, okay? Here, again, I would take as much information as you can find. So Anne found several job listings that are all related to communications and development, sort of in the nonprofit sector. I'll show you this in a second. And you're going to go ahead and give it a prompt where you're aiming to tailor your resume, and you're asking the chatbot to analyze the job descriptions to pull out relevant keywords and skills, okay? And again, this is asking, we want my resume to align with the job requirements and stand out to the ATS and hiring managers, okay? What's helpful here is by just jamming in, get 5 or 10 job listings that are attractive to you, that are all kind of the same type of position, consolidate all of those and put them all together into this same chat. Because then you're going to be pulling out themes from across several different job listings as opposed to just one thing. So it's going to help you create kind of a general, templated, tailored resume. Okay. So we can take this back to ChatGPT quickly, and I will show you. I'm just going to go ahead and copy all this stuff. Let's see if we can do this quickly. A lot of content. I'm going to start a new chat. And since I copied all this stuff here. Okay. delete that from the top, and let's see what it pulls up for us. Okay, so it's going to be looking for kind of core things that are coming up. We're seeing things related to communications. We're seeing things related to project management and development. So as you're going through, this is great to look like, okay, am I, as someone who's in communications, have I talked about communication strategy? Do I know about annual campaigns? If so, put a note, put this on a list somewhere to think about whether this is something I should include in a tailored resume. Different tools you may know how to use, right? Are those accurately represented in your resume? So this is, again, a great tool to get you started, right? To make sure you're including keywords that are going to be effective, and then you can go through and continue to optimize your resume from there. I'm not going to jump into resume, like going through and tailoring a resume bit by bit, because we won't have enough time for Q&A if I do that. But I will say that there are some really great prompts out there in the world. If you do a search, for like AI prompting for resume building, what you're looking for are prompts that give a lot of context to the tool and are asking, basically asking for very clearly like how it should be analyzed. Teal is one of the freemium tools I mentioned for job seekers, and Teal's website is they have a plethora of different articles that are all with great prompts for AI. So highly recommend that. And yeah, there are so many things you can do here. We just scratched the surface. Things like salary negotiation, interview prep, mock interview practice, in addition to the kind of more common uses for resume and cover letter building. So definitely something that can be helpful to streamline your job search process. Okay. Anne, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. I'll just jump in and say, hey, you still have to do networking. No, I mean, I think Ruthie already touched on this, but I do think that it is helpful to know that we're not suggesting that these should be used in isolation. So these tools and suggestions should be used in tandem with your in-person or virtual networking strategies. So like Ruthie mentioned, prepping for an informational interview, or prepping, using this to practice for an interview where you're going to actually be in front of another person. You want to make sure that these things sound like you, that your voice comes through. I do think as a hiring manager in a lot of cases, and I have zero problem with people using AI, but I do want a cover letter to sound like the person that I might be hiring. And so it's all of the sort of old-fashioned things that we do, have other people read your cover letter, or have read it out loud to yourself. Make sure it does sound like you, and do ensure that you're using this together with the other things that that we teach, which we'll be teaching in more workshops this summer, actually. So, okay, we can hop ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I was like, go for it.
And then this was a question that was submitted in advance as well, and Ruthie, you can chime in here too. But I think what Ruthie's done here tonight that I think is really helpful is looked at more nuanced ways to use this tool. But there is something about doing something like an informational interview or talking to other people that will give you insight into a company culture or just the overall vibe of an organization and who they want to work with, that this really can't replicate. So again, it's just a plug for doing a lot of the personal reflection and sort of, thinking about these things and having conversations with people, in addition to using those tools to brainstorm. It's a great way to use them together, but just know that it's not going to predict a perfect fit in an organization, but it's a great place to get you started.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is I think that there's a lot out there right now about like how to beat the bots and how to, like optimize your resume, like use the best cover or use the best keywords. Like, and there, you can tweak your resume until the cows come home. Right. And the best way to get a job is through conversation with other humans, through a network, through building relationships. That's a more surefire way to get a job, especially these days when we are in this era of like job seekers using AI and then recruiters and hiring managers like using AI. And it's sort of like, who's using AI to hack what? It's like cut through that noise, meet real humans, have conversations with them, and then have your resume ready to go where you're confident having used these tools that you've really like built it to the best of your ability. But I would strongly advocate for not just relying on a resume, not just relying on a cover letter, but really continuing to value the human interaction and how important that is for job seekers. Yeah. Okay. Well, questions, Sarah, I don't know if there's anything that is in the Q&A that has not been answered yet, but I can take a look at that. Yeah, just a couple of statements that I'll bring up because I think that these are important things. So Eric mentioned if you're registered with any AI apps, it's important to check privacy settings to adjust the setting not to record your chats, which is a way it trains itself. Yeah, absolutely. And I will also, I'll just show you really quick. I'm not going to go into, I mentioned before, like up here, in the settings, you can mess around with sort of data controls and security there. But also this customized ChatGPT feature, I realized I didn't show that to you all before. So if you are wanting to really personalize the response, you're wanting to make the tone sound more like you can tell it to do all of that stuff here. So just something to keep in mind as you're using that tool. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing since we're at the end of the presentation, but I'm happy to continue answering any questions that come up.
I'll just remind folks to put your question in the Q&A, and it looks like we have one that was just added, Ruthie, so I'll let you grab that.
Okay, yeah. If you want to ensure absolute privacy, unless you provide some identifying information, open a ChatGPT session in private mode on your web browser. Awesome. Yeah, great tip to really be able to navigate that. Let's see. David shared a best practice. Nice. Yeah, giving the AI chat some context here. So frame the AI chat as an enterprise level recruiter covering a wide range of organizations in blank industry. Then input your resume and ask what roles, based solely on your experience, background, and skill set, it believes you would be a strong match for. Nice. And then follow up with a specific job post details and request guidance on how to adjust your resume to best match the key competencies outlined in the role. Nice. Yeah, so it's really helpful to actually tell ChatGPT, for example, like what role you want it to play. So sometimes I'll even say something like, you're an expert level career coach working with a, XYZ type of client. Here's the situation. This is what I want you to analyze, very clearly outline that. And then you can actually check for understanding and say, does that make sense? Or do you need additional clarification to make sure that you're getting the results back? How do you access the custom page on ChatGPT? Where we were just looking. I'll share my screen again. Okay, so I went up here to my account over here on the right, customize ChatGPT, click that, and then it has options here for how you'd like it to talk, what tone. You can actually tell it here, give it more context. Like I could say, I'm a career coach, or, I'm a college career advisor. I'm typically working with X, Y, and Z type of job seeker. Like this is the tone that I speak in, right? This is the type of support that I like to provide people. And I could give it more context there.
And I think it's helpful to remember too that like depending on what industry you are applying for a job in, the tone that you want to strike might change like with your cover letter. So, I have had students who are a cover letter is going to look different if somebody is applying to work for a creative fiction literary agency than if they are, applying to work for an accounting firm. And so you do want to provide some of those details and provide some of that customization so that you're striking the right tone for the job that you're applying for. It's kind of like dressing for the job you want. It's like speaking for the job you want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What else? Any other questions that we have coming through?
And even if they're not necessarily super AI specific, you're welcome to ask some job search questions too.
Yeah. I do know that we had a question that came through earlier that someone had pre-submitted, where they asked, so I think what they asked, what approach is best when drafting and refining your application materials, your resume and your cover letter, and then also social media like LinkedIn, websites, etc. Should you ensure seamless continuity across all materials or change them specifically for that format? And I think that's a great question. And again, something where when you are using AI, this can be helpful, right, in this context. The one thing that I will say is I do think it is important to have consistency in your messaging across all of your materials. If you don't use different names across different, your online profiles versus your resume versus your cover letter, right? Use the same name across all of them. If you have a profile picture on your LinkedIn and you also have a portfolio website or a personal website, use a consistent photo so that people don't struggle to determine whether or not that's really you. I think that in this world of, hiring managers, put yourself in their shoes. They're sorting through so many different people. If they have to stop and think like, is this a real person or is this the same person? Then you may have lost them and kind of lost that opportunity. With that being said, I will say that there are certain, like what Anne was saying, you're going to tailor like a tone based on the type of thing that you're applying for. So typically, your resume is going to be very streamlined. It is the relevant, juiciest bits that are most related to that job listing. Its job is to get you in the door for an interview. It is not to share your entire life story. Okay. So there's sort of an approach to the information you take on your resume versus your LinkedIn, for example, should have all the information, that consistent information that's represented on your resume, but it's social media and it's free real estate that you have to advertise yourself as a job seeker. You can share a lot more kind of, of that narrative style of like who you are and what you're interested in. You can share more about your interests. You can just like go into so much more detail. So we want those things to be consistent. There's not like a job on your resume that isn't on your LinkedIn or vice versa, but you can expand and go into a lot more detail on your LinkedIn. So I hope that answers that question. It's just generally like you want to be consistent in who you are and like what is being talked about, but you're going to change the information slightly based on the format that you're sharing it.
Ruthie?
Rob, I'll jump in here with this question for Rob. when you're career pivoting or switching fields, and Ruthie, I'll ask you to chime in on this too. My personal take on this is the more self-awareness and emotional intelligence and knowledge that you demonstrate about the career change, the better. So, and how you are moving forward. I think it's also really important to put a positive spin on it. I never like it when I interview someone or read a cover letter where they're talking about switching career fields and it feels like they're just trying to get away from the last one. I want them to be moving forward to something, not away from something. So I want to know if, it's fine. I'm totally fine with it if somebody comes from a very different career direction, but then I want to know what captured them about this. Like, what was the process that they went to realize this is where I want to be? And so I think being super authentic about that without being overly wordy and telling way too long a story. I mean, you do want to be succinct about it. ChatGPT would be very helpful for coming up with that nice summary. But I think it's just really important to talk about what you're moving toward and why and how you have equipped yourself to make this change. But don't apologize ever for where you've been. I think that's something that sometimes people do. I think you can, Jennifer. I think you can tell that story. I don't think you want to go on and on and on. Like, you still need to be succinct about it, but you can say something to the effect of, having been in X industry, I've learned, I've developed these skills. Now I'm excited to use these skills in this new context. And here's why I'm excited to bring these skills to a different, a different place. You want to lean on the soft skills. Yeah, go ahead, Ruthie.
Yeah, so I think that just going back to what Rob was saying too, so this to me is where there's like invaluable insight to be gained in informational interviews and conversations with people in the industry that you would like to switch into. Because someone, you might be having imposter syndrome, like, oh, I would really love to get into project management, but I'm this far through my career and I don't know, I have this background. I don't know if it relates, how would I even go about making that pivot? You start having conversations with the folks who are working as project managers and they're going to be like, oh, whoa, yeah, you have this skill set. You did XYZ thing in your former job. Awesome. Like, that's totally applicable here. And you're going to gain a lot of insight from folks who are in those roles, in the positions that you would like to hold. That's going to validate, okay, yeah, these transferable skills are totally relevant. And here's how you articulate this in the hiring process. So I think that is, that's really something that's super valuable too. And knowing that employers, I think more than anything, want to hire people who are adaptable and able to learn and, aren't just stuck in their ways. So being a pivoter, even if you're far along, midway through your career, you're bringing all of this knowledge, everything you did before it's not like you're like leaving it behind and you're not going to use it in a future role, right? But you can demonstrate, like, look at the ways that I've learned things quickly in my former career. And here's how I would apply that same approach when I'm doing something new.
Jennifer, just one quick note. I think we are planning more of these, this series for alums, because we know it's a wild job market out there. So we're here for you. And I think networking is one of the topics that we had. I do think really, get comfortable with LinkedIn if you can. And so I have found LinkedIn to be one of the most useful and sort of like barrier defying forms of networking. I've literally had students just reach out to somebody on LinkedIn to say, hey, I'm a Willamette alum. I'm moving to this city. Would you be willing to talk to me for half an hour? And usually if people are checking their LinkedIn, usually the answer is yes. So it's like kind of ripping off the Band-Aid and kind of like you have to just sort of do it. But we will spend another session on that. It can be a bit of a mystery. We'll definitely cover that. And you're welcome to get in touch too.
I'll also add to that we have 13 regional LinkedIn groups and 7 affinity-based groups, and we're continuing to grow out because we wanted to build out the Willamette Career Network where a lot of our alumni are located, and that's on LinkedIn. So we'll make sure that the groups go out in a follow-up email, or you're welcome to email me or alumni at Willamette, and we'll get those shared with you. Great.
All right, so we'll pass it back to you, Abby.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us and participating this evening. I want to extend my thanks to Anne and Ruthie for sharing these great tips and for having such a wonderful discussion with us. We hope that you found this discussion useful in navigating this continually evolving job market. And we look forward to seeing many of you again online in our next professional development session. We'll be sharing more information about this later, that information later this summer. But in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely evening and look forward to seeing you online again soon. Take care and have a great night, all.